We know when students see adults who look like them, they feel empowered to succeed in school. And when those adults are supported and valued, they're more likely to stick around. Employee retention starts with the interview process. That's why at Gates Tri-Li, when you're on an interview committee, there are certain expectations to meet. First, all members of an interview committee must maintain confidentiality. Don't share questions with candidates and leave all interview materials in the room at all times. Don't take photos or send text messages during interviews. Any feedback shared by committee members should also be kept confidential. Next, stick to the script. The HR department crafts questions that reflect the duties of the position, the attributes of an ideal candidate, and the necessary skills to be successful at Gates Tri-Li. This helps us be consistent and reduce bias. Do not add or modify any interview questions. Only share feedback during structured debrief. The interview committee will hold a debrief session after all candidates have had a chance to be interviewed. Feedback should apply only to the interview performance, not any prior knowledge of the candidate. Lastly, recognize any bias you may bring to the interview. Implicit or unconscious bias are the automatic associations we make between people or groups of people, including stereotypes about those individuals. This can influence our behavior, even if we aren't aware of it. We all have bias, so in an interview process, it's imperative to be aware of how our beliefs, attitudes, values, and perception can impact our decision-making. Researchers have identified more than 150 different types of bias. Let's take a closer look at bias that commonly comes up during recruitment and hiring.
Please take a moment to review the application materials in front of you.
Oh my gosh, they went to Unicorn University? Go Unis! I'm sure they're going to be a good fit for our department.
This is a common example of affinity bias, or the tendency to get along with others who are like us. This might look like favoring candidates who attended the same college, who grew up in the same town, or in general, who remind us of ourselves or someone we know and like.
What did we think of our candidate, Enrique?
Man, they sure would motivate me to come to work every day.
And they look like they could be Jose's brother. I bet they'll do as good of a job as he did growing the role.
This is an example of beauty bias, or the tendency to connect physical appearance with job performance. This can include comments about facial features, hair, nails, tattoos, and more. Beauty bias can also look like trying to fill a role with someone who has a similar appearance to the person leaving.
What did we think of our candidate, DeAndre?
You know, our kindergartners really need someone nurturing and maternal.
Let's remember, he has 10 years of experience at Rainbow Child Care Center in the city.
They do things differently in the city. I'm not so sure he would fit the bill.
What we see here is confirmation bias. This is the tendency to favor information that confirms or strengthens our beliefs or values. This type of bias can keep some groups over or underrepresented in certain roles or companies.
Between the two candidates, which do we think is more qualified?
Well, clearly, Molly is a slam dunk.
Oh, for sure. They were so thorough in their answers and had great experience.
Conformity and authority bias can often appear together. Conformity bias is an inclination to behave similarly to the people around you. It's sometimes called groupthink. Authority bias goes one step further. When a leader weighs in and has the potential to influence the opinions of others.
Looking at the two candidates' experience, which do we think meets most of the key attributes for this position?
I really like that Camille previously worked in the circus.
Yeah, Julia didn't seem as entertaining or fun.
This is an example of contrast bias. This is the tendency to compare candidates to each other, rather than looking at whether the candidates are suitable for the role. We want to avoid changing the qualities or attributes of the position in order to match the candidates interviewed.
Rowan went to the Institute of Technological Studies and was named 40 under 40 last year. I think they could totally be a great network tech.
Plus, Riley had that gap in their experience. I know they said they had taken some personal time for their family, but clearly something's a little off.
The halo effect and the horn effect work hand in hand. In the halo effect, one outstanding accomplishment creates an impression of success that can obscure potential concerns. Conversely, the horn effect is when something bad about the candidate grabs the interviewer's attention and they can't move beyond it. These examples provide a snapshot of what bias can look like during the interview process. Keep in mind that bias can be layered and multiple types can be present at once. Now that we can spot bias, what can we do about it? Once we recognize our own bias, we can avoid making it a part of our decision-making process. Disrupting bias can look like this.
I also went to Unicorn University around that time. So, I realized that because we have a shared experience, I may unintentionally favor this candidate.
Come on, we can't select candidates based on their looks or any beauty bias. Let's focus on their experience and performance today. You're using some troubling language. You're making an assumption that he can't be nurturing and implying that just because he worked in the city, he can't be nurturing to students here. Let's acknowledge our confirmation bias and refocus on his abilities and performance in the interview.
Molly clearly connected with several committee members, but let's avoid groupthink. I don't think she provided a thorough response to the question about curricular alignment, which is a huge component of the position.
Although, being fun isn't a requirement to do the job, we shouldn't compare candidates to each other.
It's important that we not let one thing about candidates dominate their candidacy. Let's acknowledge our bias and refer back to the job description and key attributes for this position.
Disrupting bias may feel a bit uncomfortable at first, but it will be key to maintaining fidelity in the hiring process and helping us all grow and improve. Let's recap. There are 4 things to remember when serving on an interview committee. Maintain confidentiality. Stick to the script. Only share feedback during structured debrief. And recognize any bias you may bring to the interview. By serving on an interview committee, you are agreeing to these points. Failure to adhere to these standards will result in removal from future search committees. Thank you for your willingness to serve on an interview committee. If you have any questions, please reach out to the Human Resources Department.